Many thanks to Ali Zahid, the CEO of Zain Iraq, for his insightful presentation. I'm now going to ask the representative of the UNESCO, Mr. Paolo Fontani, or Mr. Rory, who's representing him, to give a speech. Sorry. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, guests of honor, I'm standing in for Paolo Fontani. My name is Rory Robertshaw. I work at UNESCO and lead the education program. I'm going to take a slightly wider view now and look at the impact new technologies are having on the labor force and what that might mean in the future for education providers. I'm looking at the question from a global perspective, but I think you'll see that many of the issues and trends that are happening on a global level are playing out in the local economy too. We're witnessing a number of significant global trends in employment. Of particular concern is the situation facing young people, evident in declining labor force participation, with unemployment reaching unprecedented proportions. Young people are almost 3 times more likely to be unemployed than adults. Where young people are employed, this is increasingly in low-quality jobs characterized by low pay, informality, and prospects of working poverty. The ILO estimate that 23% of young people who are currently employed earn less than $1.25 a day. Also, there's an estimated 621 million young people aged between 18 and 24 who are not in education or employment or in training. These are astonishing figures, and I think should raise alarm for all of us. Moreover, in the next 10 years, there will be around 1 billion young people entering the labor market in search of jobs, with the vast majority of these not resident in the advanced economies. The situation facing young women is especially worrying. Of those 620 million young people not in education, employment, and training, young women make up the majority. Driven by gender norms, unemployment affects young women more than young men in most regions of the world, but especially so in North Africa, where 44.3% of young women are unemployed, and in the Arab states, a figure of 44.1%. So in the Arab region, the unemployment rate for young women is double that of young men. So given the existing problems of unemployment and the significant pressures on future employment, what are the means of addressing this? Frankly, there's not a single answer to this question, but a complex mix of systemic factors overlaid by demographics and other trends. However, we see historically that economies that are not growing do not create jobs. So the broad factors that stimulate economic development offer a starting point for analysis. Productivity, competitiveness, investment, and access to finance can support economic growth in the context of supportive regulatory frameworks in a particular economy or market. Where these conditions are enabling, job creation is often anchored in a small number of leading newer firms creating market opportunities for products and services through innovation. Skills, too, play an important role in improving the resilience of economies and have a potential to create sustainable jobs. However, investment in skills is a blunt instrument if investment in the supply of skills is not aligned with the current and future demand for skills in the economy. Government can play a role in stimulating and diversifying economies and investing in education and employment. But the degree to which this has happened is mediated by political priorities and competing fiscal pressures, such as the need to service public debt, to make pension payments, social transfer payments, spending on other parts of the economy, security, health, etc. Aside from government, business and individuals also invest directly in skills, and this is certainly a growing trend that we see internationally, where the burden on growing our qualifications is increasingly falling on individuals or the companies that they work for. Where there's an absence in the investment in skills, there is a risk of establishing a low skills equilibrium, and this is essentially a vicious circle of low value value, low education attainment, low wages, and poor quality jobs, resulting in sustained high levels of unemployment or underemployment in parts of the economy or across economies as a whole. With globalization and particularly the impact of new technologies, the depth, speed, and extent and impact of change in those economies is set to reach unprecedented heights. This is certainly the case when considering the future demand for skills. This is a really quite revealing fact. It is estimated now that 65% of children entering primary schools today will end up eventually working in completely new types of jobs, job areas that currently don't even exist. So this creates a real challenge, but also an opportunity for education planners and providers, and indeed employers. Digitalization, big data, automation, including artificial intelligence and robotics, as well as the adoption of innovation across disciplines, creating new sectors like mechatronics and bioinformatics. These are ushering in dramatic shifts in the global economy, in the prospects of future employment, and the skills required in the future to access jobs. Aside from creating new job categories and skills demand, automation and other disruptive technologies have the potential to replace 15% of work hours globally, extended to as much as 25% of working hours in advanced economies. So this is across job roles, but on average, 25% of what we do in the future will be replaced by machines that do those functions for us. So we're talking about a radical reshape of the way we work and expectations of job roles. This is particularly impacting on jobs that require collection or processing of data and involve predictable physical routines. Despite the displacement of workers that may arise from automation, other employment opportunities from technology and innovation and new service models may help offset this. For example, the need to respond to economic challenges such as caring for aging populations, climate change, the demand for renewable energy and sustainable green technologies, as well as increased consumption opportunities arising in emerging economies. Increasingly, jobs will become more fluid and more collaborative, with people needing to move from project to project, from employer to employer, and from employment to self-employment, with the prospect of a lifelong career being replaced by individual and collective responsibility to pursue lifelong learning, because that's what will allow people to generate the new skills that are required for this fluid economy and keep pace with the continually changing labor market. Although differentiated patterns for advanced and developed economies, although there are differentiated patterns, generally mid-level roles are the ones which are prone to shrink in the future, whereas low-level skills are the most prone to demands for flexibility and cost reduction. High-level skills will be in the highest demand in areas requiring creativity, problem-solving, and communication skills. The education system needs to reorientate itself to the pace and extent of this change if it is to play a more decisive role in supporting the transition of young people, and particularly young women, into productive employment, or to facilitate the reskilling of unemployed and to support lifelong learning needs of employees in the modern economy. General education, higher education, technical and vocational education and training all have roles to play, although to some extent these boundaries between different types of education will become less important in the future. What is essential, however, is the notion of education providers anticipating and being responsive to labour market demand for skills if job creation and better jobs are to be maximised. Additionally, there will also be an inevitable need for individuals to take increased responsibility for self-management of their learning. Secondly, education providers and the education system as a whole needs to strengthen its partnership with employers, both as a means of strengthening labour market intelligence, but also to ensure that programs, educational programs, are co-produced or at the very least are relevant and aligned to the needs of employers. Graduates must possess relevant qualifications. That is to say, they should have the right knowledge, skills and competencies to match the needs of the labour force. This raises a number of challenges, namely how to access continuously updated and precise information about the skills needs of enterprise in various economic sectors. Actually, this is something that the government of Iraq has been quite active in recently. UNESCO, with funding from the European Union, have undertaken a series of labour market skills analysis which have been published for public consumption as a way of looking at what the changes are in the local labour market. As well as this, we need to address the high economic cost, particularly of technical education, and we need to look at the cultural and traditional obstacles that get in the way of learning, in particular in relation to female participation in technical courses. I think the other issue in terms of technical education is that the low esteem and priority that many societies, including I would say in Iraq, give to this particular aspect of the education system. A national technical education system financed and operated by government, even in the wealthiest nations, will fall short of keeping up with the pace of technology development and the need for frequent investment in workshops and the equipment necessary for learning. Facing these challenges creates the need for private sector participation or even integration in the technical education sector, with employers in a position to contribute some or all of the following: professional expertise in decision-making processes, co-development and delivery of curricula, supervision of learners during workplace-based training, and the formal assessments of learners, providing updated information about labour market training needs and contribution to joint innovative financing arrangements. Thirdly, there's an opportunity to change the nature and content of education delivery, and how it's assessed. Curriculum can be designed to better deliver the skills and competencies required by employers, but this is not a new idea, and it's not enough, since changes in the structure of the labour market require training approaches to reflect the fluidity of future employment, and better equip learners with transversal skills, such as communication, problem-solving, teamwork, collaborative skills, and skills that more readily support employability and self-employment. In regard to the latter, cultural and attitudinal factors often limit young people, opting for self-employment. Simply put, people with a family background in entrepreneurship are more likely to consider this option than people whose parents, for example, work in government. However, there may be less choice in the future, and more needs to be done to prepare people for self-employment. And entrepreneurship is the fastest growing skills need. It's estimated to be growing by up to 30% to the period 2030. Successful self-employment on the one hand depends on specific occupational skills and experience, and on the other in terms of generic competencies, behaviors and attitudes, such as a desire for independence, risk-taking, networking, communication skills. There's also a need to supplement functional business skills in areas of human resource management, finance management, as well as transferring key business knowledge in areas such as taxation, business legislation, and financing. Increasingly, the provision of these skills needs to be embedded in wider education and training delivery, not delivered in isolation from wider learning. Government has a mandate to ensure equality of access to tailored skills provision. This means focusing on women and the disadvantaged groups, in doing so unlocking talents and creating potential for wider economic benefits. Finally, the structure of learning programs and the models of delivery of education should also reflect the flexibility required in the workplace. This requires a stronger focus on on-the-job training, incremental programs where people can study in blocks or modules, intensive short-duration degree courses, the digitalization of learning and learning delivery, just to name a few. Education providers need to do more to bridge the divide between learning and work, shifting attention to supporting young people in their transition from learning to employment, or assist employees who are moving from one form of employment to another. The means to achieve this range from careers guidance, work experience, employer-based training programs such as apprenticeships, traineeships, and internships, and the establishment of innovation and entrepreneurship hubs to support bottom-up innovation and self-employment. If the education sector globally embraces change, it can lead to a point where educational institutions themselves are a microcosm of wider economic and societal transformation, characterized by the digitization of teaching and learning, greened campuses, seamless partnerships with employers, and fulfilling their role of champions of lifelong learning and facilitating employment for all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Robichaud, for delivering the speech of Paolo Fontane to the audience. Now I will ask Mr. Adnan Al-Janabi to deliver a token of appreciation to Mr. Ali Nasser Khwaildi, the Manager of Communications and Media Commission, for their continuous support to the Iraq Energy Forum